Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, I'm going to be giving you a load of gameplay and combat tips to help you take your Elden Ring experience to the next level. I've covered a few of these tips in a video previously, but now that a load of new people will have just got Elden Ring for Christmas and throughout the holiday period, I thought now would be the perfect time to readdress a few of these tips and help you all get to grips with the game. So we'll jump straight into it. As we all probably know, dodge rolling gives you invincibility frames, more commonly known as iframes. However, mounting and dismounting torrent also gives you invincibility frames, actually even more than dodge rolling. So especially out in the open world where you can use torrent whilst fighting bosses, this ability is very useful, particularly with some of the harder dragons, as you can mount and dismount torrent through quite a few of their attacks like you see me doing here. Get used to doing this and fights will become even easier. Before we get into tip number 2, I wanted to thank the sponsor. Number 2, we've got torches. The primary torch I want to talk about is the Sentry Torch, which can be purchased at the Hermit Merchant's shack in the Lanedale outskirts. You don't need to have this torch equipped, you don't even need to have it in your offhand, it can just be sat on your back whilst you have 2 other weapons equipped and its effect will still apply. And that effect is very powerful. It will reveal enemies that are normally invisible. You don't even need to meet its stat requirements to be able to do this. There are a few points in the game where you'll come across these invisible enemies, the most painful of which is Ordina's Evergaol. Alongside this, it will also reveal enemy players who use the Concealing Veil talisman, but does not reveal invisible teardrop scarabs. This torch is insanely powerful and definitely worth grabbing, especially for the later areas in the game. You also have other torches with similarly cool effects, though admittedly none of them are as powerful as this one. You have the Beast Repellent Torch that will quite literally do exactly what it says. Beasts will not attack you whilst you have this equipped. The more powerful ones, such as the Kaled dogs, will brave up and start to fight you eventually, but it definitely gives you a head start in all fights against beasts. And as we're talking about revealing invisible things, for tip 3, let's move on to shackles. There are 2 shackles in the game, Margits and Mogues. Margit's shackle can be used against Margit and Morgott, and Mogue's obviously against Mogue. And their primary use is that twice per fight they will bind the boss to the floor, stunning them and stopping them from acting for a few seconds. This is something we probably all are aware of. If not, there you go. But that's not what this tip is about. More importantly, either of these shackles has the same secondary use, and it is amazing. They can be used to dispel nearby illusionary walls and floors, and also trigger certain dungeon traps into shifting their state, such as the fire pillars and the frost pillar traps scattered around various dungeons and graves. In certain dungeons, such as the Oriza Hero's Grave, it can completely trivialize the puzzle inside and allow you to collide the chariots almost instantly. As for where to grab them, we'll focus on Margit's shackle because it's very easy. Just head to Murkwater Cave in Limgrave and purchase it from Patches once you have defeated him and restrained yourself from killing him. Do not sleep on these shackles. I'm always in dungeons forgetting about how damn powerful they are and how easy they can make really tough areas of the game. Next up, we're going to talk about one of my favourite weapons, and for anyone who's watched the live streams, you will know the character I'm talking about immediately, and this is Mrs. Binky Bonk and the Great Stars. The Great Stars is an insanely awesome unique weapon that will restore a small amount of health on every hit. And as of a few patches ago, you can actually acquire 2 of them in one playthrough now, both of which are in the Altus Plateau. One is on this carriage travelling on the road southwest of the Road of Iniquity sidepath Site of Grace, and the other one is dropped by Magnus the Beastclaw upon defeat. And what is even better about the health restoration that the Great Stars passive buff gives you is that this can be combined with certain weapon arts. So if you combine this with an Ash of War that hits multiple times, such as the Waves of Darkness, or even better, Golden Land, you will start to restore insane amounts of health just by using these weapons. You basically become a lifesteal tank, which is just amazing, and is one of the many reasons that this may well be the character that I take into the DLC. She is just so ridiculously powerful. For tip 5, we're going to talk about the pouch, and my advice is do not sleep on the pouch. The pouch is amazing. It gives you quick and easy access to 4 items that then don't need to clog up your other item slots. Obviously use this in whatever way you want, but personally I always have 4 items on there that are never going to go anywhere else. That is both my HP and my FP flasks, my Flask of Wondrous Physic, and Torrent. New players get into this habit immediately. If you've been playing the game for a while, start using this and you will die, but stick with it, because it will drastically reduce the time that you spend frantically flicking through your shortcuts, and you will thank me after a few hours of practice once it's embedded into your muscle memory. The pouch is such an amazing addition, and please do not forget about it. I promise you, it is amazing. I wasn't sure whether to put this next tip right at the end of the video, because it's a nice way to round out the video, but this is such a big and important one that I didn't want to leave you waiting any longer. And this tip is to not be afraid to experiment with your build. Do not worry if you absolutely mess up your build early game, because before long you'll come to the Raya Lucaria Academy, and once you defeat Renala, as long as you have a larval tier in your inventory, she will allow you to respec and reallocate every single stat point you have. There are a total of 18 larval tiers scattered across the land between. And though some of them are quite hard to get hold of, you will inevitably come across at least a few throughout your journeys, so don't be afraid to use them. And it's for this reason that you hopefully won't feel the need to create new characters again and again and again, like I know I definitely did quite a lot throughout my time with the likes of Dark Souls and Bloodborne. For tip 7, we're going to jump back on Torrent and go and find ourselves a Spirit Spring. Because, did you know, you can use them to traverse up and down. As long as you are within the vicinity of the spring, its buff will apply to you and you will take no fall damage, making traversing up and down the lands between a literal breeze. Tip 8 is going to help you tackle crystal and rock enemies. You will notice, especially if you're in melee, that almost all of your attacks just bounce off them. However, that can be very easily fixed with one simple change to your playstyle. Just two-hand your weapon. You will then be able to attack them as normal, albeit doing much reduced damage. So for the second half of this tip, to deal with the damage reduction, make sure you're fighting them with strike weapons or magic. And if you didn't know, strike weapons are anything like maces, hammers, or clubs. And as you can see, they will just melt. And now that we know how to deal with crystal and rock enemies, let's take a look at how we can tackle birds. There are two very effective ways to take down these enemies, so we'll combine tips 9 and 10 into one, because they apply to a few other enemies as well. Firstly, if you're going for a big, heavy, traditional knight build with massive plate armor, a great shield, and a massive sword, then your best friend is guard counters. During my first few playthroughs, having come from Dark Souls, I underutilized guard counters massively, and they are amazing. Just holding your shield in front of the bird will stun them in their tracks, and then you can follow it up by knocking them to the floor and demolishing them. And this technique can be applied to many, many enemies, so make sure if that's the kind of build you're going with, that you're practicing and utilizing guard counters. And for the second half of this tip, the other really effective way to deal with them is any Ashes of War or spells that can pull enemies towards you, as it will knock birds to the ground. For this, you can use the Alabaster Lord's Pull, which is the inherent weapon art of the Alabaster Lord's sword, or another Ash of War such as Gravitas, as this can be applied to many weapons. Now that you know how to effectively deal with most of the annoying enemies in the game, let's look at a few more environmental gameplay tips. Let's talk about falling, because let's face it, once you're very adept at the game, most of your deaths will come from falling. And to deal with this, I know people have recommended before to drop rainbow stones off the side of cliffs, and if they smash, you would die from the fall. However, if they land safely, then you also can land safely. But this requires you having a supply of rainbow stones, so let me teach you a much easier way to do this. Simply just keep using your standard attack at the edge of a cliff. If it's safe to fall, your character will fall off. If it isn't, you will be stuck there. And you can see now how confident I am in this mechanic, as I am literally attacking off the side of a mountain, nothing is happening. Every time you think, can I make that jump, or do I want to go all the way around? Just attack off the edge of it, and you'll know without having to take that risk. The next tip is to always defeat any enemies you see with glowing eyes, as these enemies are holding 5 times the amount of runes they usually do. For lesser enemies in Limgrave, this doesn't matter too much. Oh, instead of 50 runes, he drops 250. But later on in the game, when you're seeing enemies that drop thousands of runes, that Vulgar Militia in the Forbidden Lands usually drops, what, 5,000? If you see one with glowing eyes, that's 25,000 runes just waiting to be yours. Always keep an eye out for these enemies, and even if you're just beelining it to your next objective, I would always advise going out of your way and defeating any glowing-eyed enemies. Next up, if you're looking to min-max your damage, keep your eye out for weather effects, because they will have a genuine impact on your gameplay. Most prominently, if it is raining, any lightning-based attack will deal bonus damage, and any fire-based attack will deal reduced damage. Not that anyone needs to go this far or be this drastic, but in theory you could have two builds. You could have a lightning build and a fire build, and mix them up depending on the weather. And also, though much rarer, you will sometimes see golden leaves from the Erd tree covering the sky all around you, and this will grant you a permanent bonus to your rune gain for the duration of this weather effect. So make the most out of it, and make sure you don't rest and pass the time and skip out on this very rare event. And my final tip for this video is to have fun. Elden Ring is one of the only true open world games I know of. It is so much more freeing than most other games that claim to be open world. And with the hundreds of weapons, dozens of armor sets, hundreds of spells and incantations, the possibilities are truly endless. And I implore you to do whatever you want with this game and just have fun with it. And all that is left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.